Hi everyone, this is Christina with Black Tea News, and today we're going to be debunking the debunked, I guess, because someone on TikTok, I made them upset talking about transgender stuff. I asked them, to define a woman, and so they sent me this video and then did something else that was pretty ironic that, Ben Shapiro in this video that he says that people do, they did, and so does this person in this video, and so I just decided I would go ahead and go through the whole video. So before we jump into it, make sure that you go visit blacktnews.com, that you check out content that I have there, including articles that I've written about transgender issues and gender and biology and so on, and other issues. And you can check out the store that we have there. You can support the show that way, but you can also support the show by directly just giving. If you'd like to go to the donate page, I appreciate everything you guys do. Thank you for being part of the conversation.
Ben Shapiro is at it again. He really just cannot keep transgender people out of his mouth. I mean, I guess it's fine because I just get to keep creating content about it, but I don't know, at least get like one good argument though, Last week he posted a video titled Debunked, Transgender Ideology. And this man literally did not debunk a single thing.
First things first, I would just like to point out that I refer to people by their gender, by their biology. So I will not be calling Samantha here a she. Samantha is a man, so I will refer to Samantha as a he. If that triggers you, by your definition, gender is a social construct, and society dictates what gender is, and I think the population at large determines that it's tied to your biology. So, and if your gender ideologies and identity is tied to what you believe you feel, that's on you, but you don't get to police my speech, so there we go.
Now, in the past few years, you've heard a lot of statements that sound like we must not raise boys as boys and girls as girls, because we just can't be sure that kids actually have the sex assigned to them at birth. You may even have heard that if you're a straight dude and you don't want to have sex with a trans woman, meaning a biological male, this makes you gay.
Right off the bat, here we go with these arguments that honestly I've never even heard of. I think what he's
Why are you lying? Why are you lying? You're on social media, you have a YouTube page, like surely you have heard of people talking about if you don't like a transgender person, wouldn't date a transgender person, if you're not attracted to a trans person, then you're transphobic. Surely you have heard that. And I've seen it a lot, like I think in real life, maybe people are like, that's dumb. And there's obviously sensible transgender people who are just like, it doesn't matter, you sleep with whoever you want to sleep with, and I don't care, I can get laid on my own, I don't need you to like want me. There's other people who want that, but you gotta know there's other people who are now saying, and that's kind of the rise on like Twitter and TikTok and other places where people are like, if you will not sleep with a trans person, then you are transphobic. That's why the super straight was a thing, right? And then TikTok was so offended or whatever, they banned the creator who made super straight, and then they banned the hashtag. So it's not a straw man, that's what people are doing and what people are saying.
Referring to is when people say that you should raise boys and girls the same. They're really just referring to like the morals and stuff like that. For example, in boys, you shouldn't excuse things such as violence just because they're boys, and you shouldn't not allow a little girl to play with trucks or something because she's a girl. That's all we mean when we say raise boys and girls the same.
That is not true. Because there are people now who are trying to raise their children genderless. Let's not pretend there isn't a movement to raise people just absolutely neutral, which is its own ideology anyway.
Every right to not sleep with anybody that you don't want to sleep with, including trans people. The reality.
I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that because there's other people who feel differently. So I'm glad you are now in the reasonable camp. But let's not pretend that that's not a thing.
Males and females reproduce with one another in the human species. We've known this for quite a while. The simple reality is that the human species is sexually dimorphic. Sex is binary. We come in two brands, male and female.
Males and females reproduce. Like, gotcha. We're on the same page. Sure. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. And yes.
Okay, but you know that people are trying to say birthing people and try to get upset when you say things like men can't have periods or men can't get pregnant. So it is like appropriate to point out that we're dimorphic and biology matters.
Then he goes on to say that sex is binary, but Not exactly, Ben Shapiro. According to biologists and a variety of other scientists, sex is not at all binary. Most humans do fall on either the male end of the spectrum or the female end of the spectrum, but that does not change the fact that sex is a spectrum. The existence of intersex people shows that there are not just two sexes, and the lines between the sexes can be blurry. The sex spectrum is the concept of a continuum of people with sexes ranging from people with typical male physiology to people with typical female physiology.
Okay, but intersex, they are either more male or more female.
Now, the presence of abnormal development does not mean that sex is a spectrum. To suggest otherwise, it would be the same thing as saying that because one child every few thousand is born with 3 toes, this means that the number of toes in the human being is a spectrum.
It literally does. Yes, if you want to get all technical about it, the number of toes that a human can be born with is a spectrum.
First of all, I love, the look on his face when Ben says stuff that he disagrees with. How dare he say something like, you can only have 10 fingers and toes. We could possibly sprout wings and fly, I guess, but you wouldn't say that humans are born with wings. That's abnormal. And this is coming from someone who has family who has 12 fingers or 11 fingers. Me and my brother, there's 7 of us. We're the only 2 out of the 7 kids who were born with 10 fingers. Now, they were just little nubbins or whatever that had no bones, so you could just tie a rubber band and they just fell off when they were babies, and there's still a little lump there. But humans are born with 10 fingers, 10 toes. Is it possible that there could be a deformity? Sure. But people get offended when you mention gender dysphoria as a mental issue. You want to straight up say it's a deformity now? Okay. I just don't see that going well.
Just because most people land on one side or the other side of the spectrum, or even most of the time on one specific one of the spectrum, does not negate the fact that it is indeed a spectrum.
It's not, though. You're either a man or you're a woman.
All reproduction is rooted in the presence of sexual dimorphism. To pretend otherwise is biologically nonsensical.
So again, dude, sure. But what is the point of emphasizing that sexual dimorphism is the root of reproduction? What do you want?
Because of birthing people. Because of dumb stuff like that.
That's why, to end a conversation on transgenderism, just ask for a simple, non-self-referential definition of the terms man and woman. When I say non-self-referential, I mean you can't say, I feel like a woman, therefore I am a woman.
This is where it gets good. This is where it really gets good.
For advocates of biology, the answer for what is woman or what is man is simple. You can look at chromosomes, SRY genes, reproductive systems.
He's so offended, maybe not offended is the wrong word, but really, Ben? The facial expressions are killing me.
Verifiable answers to the question.
Pursing the lips.
Again, I clarify this in literally all of my videos when I'm reacting to people like this, but they just don't get it. The terms man and woman dictate gender. According to the World Health Organization,
Pause. First of all, I just want to note that the World Health Organization is totally corrupt, and I do want to reference people back to the coronavirus and when Taiwan was when do you think we're going to be let in and recognized? And then they totally ignored, and then they're well, can I did you hear it? And they're well, I didn't hear it. And well, let me repeat it. No, we can move on. And then they just cut it off. I mentioned that because I would like to mention that anything that involves government money or bureaucracy or whatever, just nothing is so pure that they would only just believe the science. You can trust them 100% in the sincerity, just as an organization. No, people have agendas. People subscribe to woke things. People do things to get money. People funding, notoriety, fame. Even with some of the stuff with the pandemic stuff that came out, with the whole Wuhan lab possibility, there were scientists reported that they were threatened by other scientists, by other nerds in lab coats. So you can't just be well, who said, and just expect, we should be able to just trust these organizations and what they say. But just a little FYI, just because you have a source that says something that agrees with you, don't just let's go with this assumption that it can be trusted and they just believe this and love the science, would stand up for the science. That's not how it works.
Gender interacts with, but is different from sex, which refers to the biological and physiological characteristics such as chromosomes, hormones, and reproductive organs.
Okay. Gender interacts, but is different from sex. Okay. Yeah, sure. They are different words, but let's acknowledge that this definition still acknowledges that they're intertwined, right? They are related to each other. I would argue that they are useless without one another. But let's go on.
Gender is defined again by the World Health Organization as the characteristics of women, men, girls, and boys that are socially constructed. This includes norms, behaviors, and roles associated with being a woman, man, girl, or boy, as well as relationships with each other. Refers.
Okay, let's roll the tape back.
That's why, to end a conversation on transgenderism, just ask for a simple, non-self-referential definition of the terms man and woman. When I say non-self-referential, I mean, you can't say, I feel like a woman, therefore I am a woman.
So Ben said these people can't have a definition of what is a woman, what is a man, whatever, without using the term man or woman. So what does Sam do? He uses a term describing the gender of what a woman is. A woman is someone who has the characteristics of a woman. Okay, so you prove Ben's point, right? That you can't define it without using the same word within it.
So no, Ben, I don't know what biologists you're talking to, but that's not what biologists say. The consensus is that being a man or being a woman is not at all defined by your chromosomes, by your SRY gene, or by your reproductive systems. Being a man is to be a member of the gender that is typically associated with the male sex. Being a woman is to be a member of the gender that is typically associated with the female sex. Sex, gender. They're different.
Okay, but here's also a thing about gender being a construct, which the way they use it, like your opinion that gender is a social construct, I believe is a social construct, but sure, let's go with that. I think we could all agree that mostly everyone would say that sex and gender are tied together. So society's already dictated that a man is someone who physically shares those characteristics, that your gender is tied to your sex, and that a woman is someone who is female, someone with the appropriate chromosomes. It's just these activists who are trying to convince us of something that society has already decided.
That some biological men are women, or vice versa, there is no standard that can be applied. A man can become a woman or a woman a man at any time without any stable definition of man or woman whatsoever.
I literally just defined it for you, Ben.
And it was a dumb definition. It was a dumb definition. You can keep repeating your dumb definition, but you already proved at this point that you cannot define it without actually saying what a woman is. You have to use the term. The characteristics of what a woman, the gender is defined by whatever the characteristics of a woman are.
It is simply ridiculous to suggest that if a boy is effeminate, he's actually a girl. Or that if a girl is masculine, she might actually be a boy. But this is what gender theorists argue.
No, it's not. It's literally not what we argue. Again,
People do. There's so many people who are like, I'm so glad that I grew up in the time that I did, because so many people would be trying to convince me that I am not a tomboy and that I am somehow a transgender person.
The origins of the gender identity movement lie with a professor of medical psychology at Johns Hopkins in the 1960s. His name was John Money.
Here we go.
After twin boys were born, and after a botched circumcision destroyed one boy's penis, that boy was raised as a girl. By the time that boy was a teenager, the boy felt extraordinary discomfort because he was biologically male, and his parents told him the truth.
Quick pause, I'm gonna let him finish. He did not feel this extraordinary discomfort because he was biologically male. He felt this discomfort because his gender identity was a boy.
His theory.
Oh, there you go with your definitions, trying to point that out to something that you did not even define well. But keep going, sir.
You're so wrong, dude. John Money did not believe that David Reimer was really a girl on the inside. He believed that gender was only socially influenced, meaning you could raise any child to be any gender you want if you raised them that way. This Reimer case perfectly shows that gender identity, which is different than gender as a concept, gender as a whole, it perfectly shows that gender identity is innate and unchangeable. Reimer...
If gender is a construct that is defined by society and the characteristics and the things and the norms that society dictates, then why do you say it cannot be changed? Because everyone else, like the mob, the population of a whole, are the ones who get to dictate what gender is. If it's just a construct of what we decide. if we start moving the scale about what we define as what is a man, and what you identify closely identifies with, ends up being with what's a man, then you no longer are identifying as a woman, because now we've changed the definition of what a man is. Technically, everyone could be fluid if this is the way that the world works.
He was unsuccessful, just like it is always going to be unsuccessful to try to change a trans woman's identity from a girl to a boy.
But people do detransition, and a lot of people who feel dysphoria, they normally will typically grow out of it.
It's a meaningless social construct created by society. Why does it matter more than sex, which is actual real biology? And why is gender more real than biology itself? Why would anyone need to change his or her body in order to align with gender? A social construction, when gender and sex are completely separate in the first place.
First of all, I just want to quickly point out again that Shapiro and other conservatives like Shapiro love to intentionally mix up the concepts of gender and gender identity to confuse the viewers. So just keep that in mind. They are completely...
Whoa. I just get past his important question though. If all that matters is your identity, how you identify, then why do you need to change your body? If all that matters is how you think you are and you believe that you're a woman, why do you get surgery? Bottom down surgery, top surgery, give yourself boobs? Why do people cut off their boobs? Why do you mutilate your body in the ways that you do, wear the makeup that you do, grow out your hair, do your hair the way that you do, whatever, to make yourself, on the outward appearance, make yourself more fitting to how you feel, if all that matters is how you identify? There are other people with gender dysphoria who've come to terms with that and have not gone through surgery and other things, like Chad Felix Green. In the book that is banned from Amazon, When Harry Became Sally was something that comforted him to come to grips with how he felt. And he still identifies as having, gender dysphoria, but he's, living his life as a gay man. I believe he's married. If you truly do have gender dysphoria and you feel that your identity is different and you were born in the wrong body or whatever, but you acknowledge that biology is different, and you kind of sneered all this time that Ben mentions biology, if it doesn't matter, then why are you trying to play catch up to what God didn't give you? Serious question. Because you transition, but you're running a race you'll never win. There is no finish line you can obtain, because you'll never be a woman. You can always believe that you are, but you must realize what I've already said, that there is something very special and undeniable about sex and gender being intertwined, really not valuable without one or the other, because you feel the need to try to play catch up, like I said, with what God didn't give you. Because otherwise you could just live your life maybe just dressing the way that you want, but you took a lot of effort to physically change how you are to match your identity. It's not much different than that kid the other day who decided he was Korean. Except I think that makes more sense.
Nobody is saying that gender is more real than biology. Nobody. However, just like you pointed out with the John Money case, gender identity is unchangeable. Maybe no one is saying that gender is more real than biology, but people are trying to ignore that or make it seem like gender ideology or identity is more important than biology. That's why you have these men who are playing in women's sports. Whatever their identity is, they feel that it is more important than the physical advantages they have toward women, biological women. These men who have failed or been very mediocre competing with other men who wake up and decide, I am a woman, and they go ahead and change themselves and they're identifying, and now they're killing it, which they're killing it because there's a biological difference between men and women, which you have acknowledged. But all that mattered was identity. You can identify as a woman, but still play with the men. You don't need to cross over. Why even take hormones and all that stuff? All that mattered was how you feel. And so there's people pushing back so hard, like you're against trans, say stuff like you're against trans rights. There's no consideration to how biological women, cisgender women feel, because there are people trying to convince you that the identity is important or more important than biology in reality, where we're all rooted in.
Gender dysphoria, which is what we're talking about here, is a serious and tragic disorder. It is also extremely rare. People suffering from gender dysphoria, which, in its non-politicized definition, means the persistent belief that you are a member of the opposite sex, have a tragically high suicidal ideation and depression rate. that suicidal ideation rate remains tragically high after surgical and hormonal treatment.
He's like, the rate of being transgender is increasing and it's becoming more popular, but then literally gives us an example of why that's happening. It's because of that representation provided by people like Elliot Page and the
No. Abigail Schreier talked about this, who wrote Irreversible Damage.
So let me tell you 3 reasons I don't think that's compelling. Number one, when Lisa Littman looked at the prevalence rate, she found that it's 70 times what we would expect within a friend group, which means it's highly concentrated in groups of friends. But there's 2 other reasons. So we wouldn't expect that if it were randomly distributed among the population. But there are 2 other reasons I don't think that's right. Number one, if we're just reverting to normal now that there's greater societal acceptance, right? We're just reverting to a normal base rate of transgender women. Why are all the women in their 40s and 60s coming out as trans? They should be coming out. Now's their time. Now's their moment. We should see tons of women in their 40s and 60s and so on coming out as transgender. But we're not seeing that. We're seeing the same population that gets involved in cutting, demonic possession, witchcraft, anorexia, bulimia, and convinces themselves there's a problem. And there's one last reason, is that suicide rates are going up. But if these women who were living under a prior, supposedly these real transgender people who were living under a more repressive regime and are now just finding themselves, you would think the suicide rate would be going down with greater acceptance.
And what I also find interesting is that Matt Walsh and Glenn Greenwald made a point a few months ago about how they were curious about, well, Glenn was interested about the relation of how people are conditioned and how that is affecting the rate of people coming out as trans. And Matt was just it's obvious that there's an element here where so much of our culture is playing into people deciding that they are trans, and people acted like that was crazy, he was so bigoted for mentioning such a thing that's so obvious. Corporations doing everything with Pride Month. I mean, Disney had a concert with Kermit the Frog and a drag queen. Nickelodeon had a drag queen singing this terrible song. On Blue's Clues, they had a pride parade and was look at all these different families, but the only family they didn't represent was a regular traditional nuclear family. They're here's some allies, but they weren't a family. But they mentioned all these other sort of families. It's being ingrained. Even in sex education, I had a friend who was on a board and sex education in Michigan is supposed to be about preventing pregnancy, but they decided to add all of this trans ideology, gender ideology in it from high school all the way down to kindergarten, and I'm not even joking. Ben, some years ago, he wrote a book called Primetime Propaganda. People put things into TV and so on, not just to represent people, but to influence people too. Here, Samantha admits that people are influenced by people like Ellen Page coming out and changing her name to Elliot, but that does mean it's a trend. It's a fad. And 60 Minutes did a report about some people who self-diagnosed and they decided that they were trans. People didn't push back on it because there's fear or sort of with the, scientific community. And they're not really pushing back. They're just kind of affirming people self-diagnosing themselves. And this one woman on the show, she went ahead, had her surgery, took her hormones, chopped off her breast, and then decided to detransition all within the span of a year. But people, especially young people, gravitate toward what they feel is popular, even though they might be a little of an outcast, but it makes them feel different. But they're still following a crowd at the same time. And if this was just a natural progression of people just deciding to come out because of how society is, you would see a lot older people doing it. But what you see is a lot of young girls who are usually troubled.
As for the high suicide rates, the studies show that they are only that high when that trans individual has their gender identity rejected, which is exactly what Ben is doing. If you really care about those rates being high and you want to, help people, stop making videos like this that are literally hurting us.
This is a really, really unfair position. You want the whole world to not be able to speak and have conversations, to coddle around something you don't even want to refer to as a mental illness, but you're saying if we can't have a conversation because you're so fragile that you might kill yourself. And that's not the case with everyone. It's unusually high, but it's not at like 100% or something like that, or 90 percentile or something crazy like that. So saying that we can't even have a conversation or things like this, it causes so much harm. Wouldn't it be better to work through and have conversations about how people, they may feel a certain way, but people at large as a society isn't going to just accept the fact that they say they're a woman, therefore they are a woman? So wouldn't it be better to learn to accept yourself and not become so fragile that you would destroy yourself because I won't conform to your personal thoughts? And some ideologies are harmful, but you're blaming us for suicide. Don't you think perhaps there's something that you need to work out? If Ben Shapiro making a video and people having discussions can lead you to end your life. I don't know how to say this delicately, but it's not fair for the whole world to revolve around you.
But suffering from a mental disorder does not change your underlying sex, any more than believing that you are Napoleon Bonaparte makes you Napoleon Bonaparte.
How many straw man arguments are we going to get in this one video?
That's not a straw man.
Trans people are fully aware that having gender dysphoria does not make you the opposite sex.
Okay, you don't believe that you are literally a woman biologically, but you do believe that you are a woman. And if we don't accept that you're a woman, you're saying people like you will kill themselves. But the Napoleon example was too far? Okay.
It means that our gender identity does not match our sex. So therefore, we try to change our bodies to more closely resemble our unchanging gender identity.
Why? You so strongly know that you are a woman. Why do you need to take hormones? Why did you need to wear makeup like that? Why did you? And you may just like it, so maybe that's unfair. I mean, there's people who dress in drag, but why did you have surgery? Why? If all that matters is your gender, if you knew that you were a woman, the why did you feel the need to mutilate your body in that way?
Does that make sense? Am I breaking it down well enough for you?
No, it doesn't make sense.
Now, none of this means that anybody suffering from gender dysphoria ought to be mistreated. Anybody with any sort of disorder ought to be treated with nothing but sympathy and care. But this does mean that a society that seeks to propagandize to children that they can switch their gender is both lying to kids and doing them psychological harm in the process.
I hate this phrasing, switching your gender. Nobody switches their gender. A trans girl's gender identity has always been a girl, whether they knew that or not. What he's really trying to say here is nobody is transgender, and telling people that you can possibly be transgender is causing psychological damage, which
but people do believe that they are a woman or a man or whatever and then change their mind. Are you saying that they were just always mistaken? Kind of reminds me of like when people argue once saved, only saved, which I'm sure I just triggered a lot of people. And they'll say things like, oh, if you stray away from Christianity, then you were actually never saved to begin with. How can you know that? How can you determine that? Especially if you felt in your heart that you were saved and now you're not. Why do you get to make that determination that someone who believed that they were trans and they no longer are trans? So for example, what about people who find religion and wake up and they're like, oh my gosh, I was misled all the time and I wasn't really trans. You're saying that they were mistaken the whole time? Like, why do you have the corner market on how someone perceives themselves?
55 studies that consist of primary research on this topic, of which 93% found that gender transition improves the overall well-being of transgender people, while 7% report mixed or null findings. We found no studies concluding that gender transition causes overall harm. You're just making that up. If anybody's propagandizing some bullshit, it's you, Ben Shapiro.
Again, I would like to refer to people who have made this mistake and are like detransitioning. I've seen some pretty darn heartbreaking stories of people who detransition and like they lose things, like their female voice and it's gone, and that was a thing that they hated, and then after they want to realize that they were actually a woman all along, they're like, this is a thing I wish I had. I mean, just tragic stories.
With the new Equality Act,
the motion is adopted.
The Biden administration and the Democratic Party are seeking to promote the idea that any institution that doesn't mimic these lies has to be destroyed.
The Equality Act is a non-discrimination law. These people cannot live just like, I want to discriminate. No organization is allowed to discriminate against trans people. That's what he's complaining about. He's like, well, my church should be allowed to discriminate against them, so this Equality Act is pretty bad.
Freedom of association, freedom of religion. Yes, people should be able to decide, that men shouldn't be able to go into a woman's bathroom or something like that just because you say that you are or whatever. Like, we just want equality. No, you want to oppress someone else's rights. You should not be able to go to a women's shelter as a biological man, say that you identify as a woman with your dingleberries all still there, and then be there where women, in a space where women have been abused by men or whatever, and make them feel uncomfortable just because you want to. There's no consideration or barely any for other people of the other gender who don't see the world as you do. Equality is everyone having the same rights. It is not you having special rights or you invoking your privilege over other people. It's, oh, you don't like me? Oh, okay, I guess I'll have to live with that. That's not you are discriminating, like me causing you some sort of unequal harm. You have other choices, but you don't have to inflict your oppressive will over other people because you just feel like it. You are not that special. If we could all just learn that you are not that special, if that was a thing, maybe we need a shirt or something that says you are not that special. and just go from there.
In the end, a man claiming to be a woman is making an unsustainable claim. He can't even know what it is like to be a woman because he is not one. A man with surgeries and hormone treatment does not become a woman, nor does a man who simply declares himself a woman. All of this is insane propaganda that is being propagated for political purposes. So, no.
No comment there? You don't want to explain how you know that you're a woman and feel like a woman? No comment there?
A man cannot become a woman or a woman a man.
This final claim that he makes that it's all for political purposes and, being transgender and this whole trans ideology is just politically motivated is just so ridiculous to me because these bills, like the Equality Act, are saving transgender people's lives. But what's the point of your video, Ben? To defend a biology that doesn't agree with you? No, I don't think it is. I think it's actually to appeal to your right-wing, science-denying, transphobic viewers.
And there we go. You don't think it's political, but you believe you decided to trash Ben and say that he's disingenuine from just trying to tackle an issue and have this conversation and debunk some stuff because he's been doing this for a long time with a lot of different topics. And you're accusing him of just being an insincere bigot who's just doing this all to appeal to a bunch of other bigots. Of course these things are political. Most things are political. Just about everything is political, especially when you start putting them in bills. They're political. Do you think Cori Bush got up and said birthing people instead of just saying women have babies when she talked about her experience of having children because it wasn't political? Because pregnancy is 100% biology focused. You can't identify your way into having a baby. So there's no point in saying dumb stuff like that. There's no point in politicians getting up and pretending like people can, like men can have periods and all this other kind of stuff. If you don't think that's political, that is amazing. But I would certainly, as someone who works in politics, I can tell you that I don't believe that for a single second. Not a single second. But it's over now. That was a long video, and like I said, I don't believe Samantha went ahead and really debunked anything that Ben was talking about. Particularly, he proved Ben's point about the wording, that you cannot define the gender of a woman without actually using the word woman within the definition, which the WHO, World Health Organization, fell prey to that. And the person who told me to watch this video as the definition of the woman, I did a TikTok response to it. The person who led me to this video, they did the same thing. They defined woman as whatever you feel like. But that's not a very convincing argument. I mean, my nephew can make a better argument about why he's Spider-Man. But sure, if you want to identify whatever way you want to identify, there's no one stopping you from doing that. However, that if you want to make laws that will affect the rest of society, it's just frankly not good enough, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. But thank you guys for watching. I'm sure it ticked off a lot of people. That's okay. But if you would like to support, you can go to blackteennews.com and check out my website. Check out different articles that I've written, including on like gender and trans stuff. If you would like to support, you can go to the donate page, or you can also check out different merchandise that we have in the store. Find something that you love, that you like, and support it. And thank you for being part of the conversation. I think it's important to be able to have conversations, and if you're not able to have them, you need to grow up or get off the internet, please. But God bless you guys, and I'll see you next time.